Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only, Mexi here once again, and I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Paper Mario, aka for those of you who lived in Japan, Mario Story for the Nintendo 64. So, last time, we somehow managed able to fully begun the forms of Chapter 7 by able to actually, first of all, we did somehow manage able to explore into Shiver City, and because of that, we somehow ended up in the Penguin Murder Mystery, which as a result, thankfully we did somehow manage able to figure something out about the forms of this particular mystery, which actually as it turns out, the mayor was pretty much alright for now, especially because no matter what though, thankfully he's not dead or anything, he's just somehow managed able to get into his accidental moments, especially because no matter what though, he was able to give the actual specific item to someone that's very important. So, yeah, you get the idea about that. And in addition to that, we also did manage able to bump into Junior Trooper for the 5th time, and as a result, thankfully though we still managed to kick his butt no problem, and in addition to that, we also did manage to battle against with even more enemies, and especially noticeable, we've already also able to come across into Monstar, which as a result, that boss is a piece of cake, especially because, you know, Power Plus badges equipped, and everything. So yeah, and also, finally, we somehow ended up in the Starborn Valley, which as a result, we came here to able to actually only try to get the scarf, which as a result, yeah, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that in order able to actually access to, well, the main part of the chapter is that basically though, not only do we need to able to get ourselves the scarf, but also we do need to able to get the last item, which appears to be the bucket for one of those specific snowmen in particular, which speaking of which, is that today for this video, is that we're about to be making our way to the Crystal Palace itself. So as a result, that's going to be all part of a plan, especially concerning for the fact that, well, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that, well, fundamentally speaking, I was about the fact that, yeah, there's, the bucket we need to get, and thankfully it's not too far from there, especially because no matter what, though, I was about the fact that all we have to do for this point is that we need to talk to the mayor in order able to actually do it that way, because otherwise, though, if we managed able to obtain both, you know, the scarf and the bucket, then obviously, though, we can able to actually continue things on in terms of Chapter 7. So because of that, though, pretty self-explanatory for the most part, especially because, well, there's only one backtracking moment, and that's all there is to it, basically. Unlike this very schizophrenic, you know, Chapter 6 in mind, well, usually because you still need to able to try to go after specific amount of seeds in order to able to progress, and you get the idea for that point. So, anyways though, so yeah, a few things I want to talk about this is though, and that's what appears to be for the fact that, well, today's date of course there is the 2nd of May today, in some cases in 2025 today, and did you guys know, for those of you who lived in the UK, did you know it's been 11 years since Mario Golf World Tour did somehow first came out for the Nintendo 3DS, and still, while looking back on it though, it's actually still, without doubt, is the greatest Mario Golf games ever, especially because no matter what though, you can play the game on the go, and on top of that, the character roster is very solid, despite the fact that, well, it's incredibly unfortunate that you can no longer able to actually access to DLC content ranging from Toadette, Nabbit, and Rosalina especially, and even with Gold Mario as well, unless if you're trying to able to actually hack your Nintendo 3DS if you wanted to, but I'm probably not going to risk it too much, because obviously though, the good thing about this is though, is that I've already got every single DLC just before the actual, you know, eShop is, you know, getting to its dead root and all that stuff, or should I say, the eShop applications for both the Wii U and Nintendo 3DS has officially gone down. So relatively speaking, I was about the fact that you probably get the gist of it, so anyway though, so yeah, let's talk about the phones of that particular update as I've somehow on about ever since yesterday with the forms of the Nintendo Switch version update, specifically version 20.0.0, and as a result, they somehow run down quite a number of things here and there, such as, for instance, though, we've already known for the fact that they somehow introduced into ourselves the virtual game cards. So basically, though, it's about the fact that we'll run down the list to see of the forms of specific information they somehow brought ourselves into, such as, for instance, though, with the forms of the following icons for new features have been added for the home menu, specifically for Switch 1. So, as I mentioned this before, first of all we have is the virtual game card. If you manage to purchase the Nintendo Switch digital software, or DLC, and some free software, are now virtual game cards and displayed in the list in the actual menu. So as a result, yeah, everything else checks out there. Also, that particular junior trooper right there has somehow got frozen all of a sudden, which as a result, yeah, he somehow got stuck. So as a result, heh. Anyway, also, for the fact that you can virtually load and eject virtual game cards between up to 2 Nintendo Switch systems. It could either be the original version or the OLED model nowadays, and especially noticeable with the improvement battery version or Switch Lite. So, yeah, that's always something. And also, virtual game cards can be lent to others in the same Nintendo account family group. For more information, see the virtual game card guide. So yeah, I guess that's that. The next new feature they somehow added in for Nintendo Switch version update with 20.0.0, that's what appears to be the introduction into the game share functionality, which as a result, obviously though, it can be summed up as like this. Compatible software can be shared from a Nintendo Switch 2 system to other nearby systems to play together. Like, you can only play together via local wireless, and the Nintendo Switch 2 system must accelerate game share. And this feature cannot be used between 2 Nintendo Switch or Nintendo Switch OLED model and Nintendo Switch Lite systems. So as a result, you know, think of like the good old days where it comes to likely for not only for the Nintendo DS, alongside with the forms of the Nintendo 3DS, with the forms of the download play, which as a result, basically it's like, you know, wireless connection multiplayer and stuff like that. So, because for example though, it's about the fact that with let's just say, in Mario Kart DS, Mario Party DS, alongside with the forms of maybe Mario Kart 7, alongside with Mario Party Island Tour, Mario Party Star Rush, and Mario Party The Top 100, then obviously though you only need one copy of the game, whilst meanwhile for the other players, do need able to actually access to the download play, not able to actually access to multiplayer with all these particular multiplayer kind of games like that. So as a result, yeah, it's pretty cool they somehow managed to technically brought back that particular feature for the likes of, well, maybe potentially with Nintendo Switch 2 or Switch 1 specifically. I'm not entirely 100% sure, but regardless of such though, yeah, that's always something. So, and the next new thing they somehow added in, and that's what appears to be, user verification settings has been added under user settings. So as a result, you can now, or you can restrict access to the virtual game card menu by requiring entry of a PIN or signing in to your Nintendo account. So, and meanwhile, we've also got online license settings have been added as well. When turned on, you can play downloaded software or DLC you've purchased while the system is connected to the internet, even if you don't have the virtual game card loaded. And for more information, please refer to the details about the option on the system settings screen. So, and in addition to that, they also somehow managed able to change some little aspects, like for instance though, both the news app alongside with the forms of the Nintendo eShop icons for your home menu, the colors have been changed, which as a result, I believe normally on the previous system update, I believe the news icon is obviously in red, whilst compared to the eShop was obviously in orange. so it's now been changed. So as a result, though, is about the fact I get the feeling that the eShop icon is now in red to match the phones of the Nintendo brand. So yeah, that's actually pretty cool. And same applies with the phones of back in the day, from the likes of Vince, ever since in, 35th anniversary of the Super Mario Bros. Franchise back in June the phones of in 2020, despite the fact that it's kind of unfortunate we still cannot see the very cool loading transition with the Super Mario 64 render running across the phones, that particular stuff like that. So I digress. So anywho though, and yeah, as I mentioned this earlier, for the fact that usually relatively speaking, that the Nintendo eShop and Nintendo Switch News icon colors on the home menu have been changed. So, and I'm pretty sure for the fact that they somehow managed able to improved upon some things, or I can't really think about to describe it because it has been about quite a few days ago since I actually have last played my Nintendo Switch, just because I'm still about to be preparing to try to get myself Nintendo Switch 2 if that particular stalking situation still keeps on going, which as a result still is incredibly difficult as far as trying to get the system to meet though, compared to the phones of how it does on the past years, where, for instance though, back in June the phones have been sometime in 2018, if I could recall, that I somehow managed to get myself my Sega Saturn, specifically the Model 2 version, because, as you expect, I just want to get myself every single Sega systems, well, apart from few exceptions, which appears to be SG-1000, alongside with the forms of Sega Pico, and especially noticeable with the forms of some other prototypes as well. Well, it's hard for me to explain about this particular subject though, but I digress. So yeah, back into what I was saying about the forms of other updates they did somehow brings us into. Like, for instance, is about the fact that there's now multiple save data can now be selected and transferred at once in your transfer your save data menu, so that's always something. And they also added in the system transfer to Nintendo Switch 2 has been added under system settings onto the system category. So because of that though, yeah, I guess that's all there is to it though, especially because obviously though, that we already know for a fact that, the majority of the Nintendo Switch 1 games will be backwards compatibility for Nintendo Switch 2, so just to ensure for the fact that we can able to actually see some improvements over the forms of how it does it on Switch 1, so yeah, you can get the idea about that. So, it's also great about the forms of, trying to come across into Frost Piranhas potentially with all that fire shell, as we somehow use that particular technique for Koopa right there. That way, it should be a lot more effective when it comes to try to deal with the forms of ice-based enemies. So as a result, it's kind of convenient enough about the fact it's a good thing we did somehow manage to able to increase, or should I say we've somehow powered up Koopa for the sake of the forms of the Ultra rank. So as a result though, that way we should able to get the chance to able to actually try to able to demolish any other enemies all at once, specifically with all that ice piranhas or just essentially frost piranhas potentially. So yeah, you get the idea about that. So now I'm pretty sure similar to the forms of how it does it for smack ability for bow, basically though you have to keep on tilting the control stick to the left rapidly, and that way you should build up the gauge and everything else goes all pretty self-explanatory right there. So yeah, anyway, and there's also worth knowing for too, I really love the background music you're going to be hearing for a moment, because obviously though, not only does it sound very atmospheric, but it's also really dang catchy too, with all that particular compositions or anything else like that. So yeah, that's actually pretty swell. Also, there's a hidden block right up there, which does contain, what else? The Ultra Shroom. So yeah, that's actually pretty swell, especially it's almost where it gets to the point for the fact that once you make your way towards the end game, you do realize about the fact that we can now able to actually get some very, very good healing items and all that stuff, specifically the Ultra Shroom alongside with the forms of Jamming Jelly, and yeah, you get the idea for that. So either way, oh geez, what the heck is going on here? So it may look like there's actually not one, but two Koopas. So, oh, I see what this is. It may look like it's gonna be one of them is like a fake, and then the other one is real. So we got to able to figure something this out just before we're able to actually continue our progress here. So because of that, and yeah, I've already mentioned about the fact that yes, indeed, they somehow updated some new Switch icons for that particular version update as well, so I don't feel like trying to mention about that again, because obviously though I've already addressed that since yesterday. So, anyway, then now let's move on to the next category I want to point things out, and that's what appears to be for the fact that, well, recently though, Mario Kart 7 has now been added to the Nintendo Music app. So as a result, I think fundamentally speaking though, is that we are technically now on two or three Mario Kart Music or something like that. Well, mind you, I haven't exactly utilized the Nintendo Music for quite some time, because I'm still waiting for Super Mario Galaxy 2 music selection will be added, alongside with the forms of Super Mario Sunshine as well, because both of those games in particular does have some very awesome soundtracks to me though, so either way. Oh gee, this looks familiar. Especially, technically, we've already come across into such an enemy like this, or it's not necessarily an enemy, but to be more specifically, it almost reminds me like a similar kind of vibes as the forms of Lee from the likes of one of those dojo matches. So because of that, something tells me about the fact that we must able to actually face off against with one of these guys. So either way, not just one, but two in particular. So either way, of course, we can able to bring Good Mario out, so just in case we can once again title for this. So these are the forms of Duplo Ghosts, because get it, because they almost like a ghost vibes to it. So obviously that was about the fact that they somehow shape-shift into someone else, specifically partners essentially. So because obviously though we've technically already come across into that solution, since you know we face off against with Lee in a dojo match. So either way, in terms of Duplo Ghosts, they somehow got, in terms of status though, they somehow got 15 HP and attack power is 4. And lastly, for defense power was, of course, 0. So because of that though, yeah, you can pretty much expect about the fact that the majority of the enemies, for the sake of this chapter, always attempt to have, you know, 0 defense. So, and as you can tell, we somehow use the chill out move, and basically that allows the enemies to able to actually decrease attack power. So that's gonna be recommendable in some scenarios, especially because no matter what though, we don't get thrashed very fast, especially because since that, you know, we've almost nearly at the end of the game, so as a result though, that the enemies do more damage than it should be, because obviously that is about the fact that, again, the more we've progressed, then obviously the tougher enemies might able to actually get a lot more aggressive at one point. So, but yeah, that's as far as we can able to say in terms of the forms of the latest version updates for Nintendo Switch 1. And it's also worth noting for 2, is that out of nowhere, for those of you who lived in North America or something like that, well, conveniently enough, Lilo and Stitch, specifically 2002 movie, has managed able to receive the very, very cool brand new 4K Blu-ray release, and from what I've seen it looks really, really spectacular. Especially, I get the feeling about the fact that the reason why that particular release exists is because of the upcoming release of Lilo and Stitch live-action movie, which as a result, yeah, speaking of which, that was about the fact that we've only just got about 3 weeks left until that particular film decides to come out, and we still have no idea how I feel about it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm still curious to check it out, even though, unlike the forms of how it does it, that how bad Snow White remake is, especially because it still is a flop, and relatively speaking, I was about the fact that I just don't want to talk about that film anymore, because obviously though, you guys already heard enough about the films that how bad that remake is, so anyway, as you can see, we've now come across into White Clubbers right there, which is basically more accurately a powerful version of the Clubber enemies as we've already fought ever since in Chapter 3. So now, about the fact that in terms of status-wise, White Clubbers does have 12 HP and 5 attack power and of course 0 defense power. So because of that though, we can able to take these guys on with the forms of our first move, which is of course the Star Storm, as we expected. So just in case, we can able to actually deal with like 7 damage for 2 enemies at a time. So I can imagine about the fact that if we somehow managed able to come across into the final chapter in the game, and obviously that was about the fact that we can able to expect that we can able to actually keep on utilizing the Star Storm for quite a lot of times, at least as far as we can definitely tell from the get-go. So either way, let me bring out Let me think of something here. Lackluster, so just in case we can able to finish these guys off with the forms of Spiny Search, so that way we can just keep doing this. And fundamentally though, oh, come on! He's almost down. Okay, let me think of something, so... Oh boy. Well, luckily though, we've almost nearly at our next level up for sure. I mean, chances are though, it can take a bit while to get our level ups going, especially unlike when it gets to the point for the fact that if I decided able to go back onto the previous chapters for the sake of trying to able to keep on fighting some more, not only certain letters to deliver, alongside with the forms of some star pieces here and there as well. Obviously though, I might try to able to equip not only first attack, but also with the forms of bump attack as well, so just in case we don't have to necessarily try to worry about trying to deal with the forms of weaker enemies during battle transitions, because, well, straight to the point, we are extremely powerful now. So either way, so there's our next super block right there, or technically the final one, despite the fact that I somehow missed the last one somewhere in Journey Forms of Toad Town Tunnels, which I might try to save that for later. So for now, let's continue our progress here. So as you can see, we actually come across into not one, not two, but 3 items on the actual pedestal right there. Or to be more accurate though, on these little inserts. And basically though, if you dare try to able to actually get one of these items out, although mind you, despite the fact I can't carry that much more items at this point, because still, we can only carry up to 10 items at a time. So no matter what though, we should probably bring out the, that syrup on, so just in case we can able to actually restore our flower points if we somehow come across into the next battle, so either way. So yeah, for instance though, if you try to able to actually grab the shooting star from that particular insert right there, obviously if you couldn't tell, the actual doors decides to block the path, and as a result, yeah, it's more accurately kind of like, if you try to steal an item, then you can't go further from there. Because, well, relatively speaking, that was about the fact that if you try to keep on doing that, then obviously that was about the fact you have to put those items back to where it was. So just in case, if you do something like that, then obviously that was about the fact that we can able to progress for this point, so... But either way, so now we've actually done with that, and there's a cracked wall right there, so I guess we should probably bring out Bombette out, so just in case we can able to blow up this wall, and fundamentally speaking though, we can now able to actually proceed into this very peculiar cave, which as a result is not so much of a cave, but it's almost like a, kind of like a shrine almost, for the sake of the forms of near towards the entrance to, Crystal Palace itself, because yes, there was actually that little star hole insert right there, so I guess we have no choice but able to go down there. So just in case, no matter what though, just to see what really happens if we... Oh, I did not notice we can able to go through here. This looks peculiar. So, anyway, and I suppose there's technically the final thing I want to discuss upon, just before we're able to actually continue our progress for this point. And that's what appears to be for the fact that I've noticed about the fact that there's one little, key difference in between both Switch 1 game cards alongside with the forms of Switch 2 game cards. Now, normally we already know for the fact that the colors itself is a little bit different. Like Switch 1 game cards are usually grey or black even, whilst on Switch 2 game cards it's now in red. Similar to the forms of how it does it back on the 3DS, where basically though with the Nintendo DS they obviously contain grey game cards. And then meanwhile for the 3DS, obviously though, the game cards are in white. So as a result, and also they added this little knob, just in case it does not get inserted onto the Nintendo DS models. But it's also worth noting for too, the actual shape of the inserts of the game cards for Nintendo Switch 2 looks a bit different compared to the forms of how it does it for Switch 1 game cards essentially. Just because no matter what though, I'm guessing it's hard for me to explain about this particular subject though, because, well, relatively speaking though actually, is about the fact that we've only got about approximately 34 days left until, you know, Nintendo Switch 2 is about to be releasing, so as a result, Still, we are getting very close to the point for the fact that we can able to get hyped about Nintendo Switch 2, despite there are some issues, much like the defaults of how it does it for Switch 1, but some differences here and there. And it's also worth noting for 2, that I found was extremely baffling about the fact that the actual game price tags for Xbox nowadays is also going to increase as well. So no matter what though, yeah, I get the feeling for the fact that for the future years to come, I might actually just go out and say this is about the fact that if the new PlayStation 6 exists, or the new Xbox systems will be existing as well, I'm probably not going to go after those systems, I have to be honest here, but that's just mainly because at this point in time, the economy is about to get messed up at one point, which is especially noticeable that back in the day, that usually for games, or physical games I should say, used to be quite cheap, whilst now, it's actually going to get ridiculously overpriced, especially because no matter what though, it's even bad enough that most people still complaining about, in terms of physical Switch 2 games, are still basically just high prices and all that stuff, which is especially noticeable considering for the fact that we already know that Mario Kart World is pretty much expensive physically, whilst compared to digital though, is actually not too shabby for the most part, but still pretty pricey as it is, which you get the idea for that point. So, and by the way, something's worth noting for, we can no longer try and able to actually access the cave section right now, just because we can now able to activate the massive staircase, and as a result, not only does it lead us to potentially the next paths, but it's also, I get the feeling we might come across into not only the save block, but as well as the recovery block as well. So hopefully that'll be the case, mind you. So just in case that, oh yeah, let's go ahead and take care of this, you know, white clubber alongside with the forms of the upper 3 enemies right there. So we can able to use the Mega Bomb right here. So that way we, actually, no wait, let me go ahead and change into, I guess I have no choice, do I, Koopa? So just in case we can able to actually use the fire shell, so hopefully we can able to take those guys down. Well, almost anyway, so, well, except for one of those white clubbers there, so that's something. Oh yeah, and also I'd like to point things out as well is about the fact I've recently managed to able to check out yet another DreamWorks movie. I was actually quite pleasantly surprised, and that's what it appears to be for the fact I've recently watched The Croods on Netflix, and from what I've seen it so far, it's actually not too shabby for the most part, even though that it does take me a bit of a while to get used to with all that certain aspects and all that stuff, but either way, so we've somehow reached our next level up, so either way, and yeah, we'll go for HP, just in case we do need to get some more HP, before we're able to actually come across into more tougher battles, so anyway, so here's our Mega Jump right there, so that'll be pretty useful, especially because no matter what though, it actually deals a lot of damage if you somehow manage able to equip the Mega Jump, but here's the thing though, I'm still out of, room for the sake of the forms of one of those badge points again. So, oh well, not too much of a big of a deal, but regardless of such though, I might try to able to use that for specifically towards the end game or something like that. I think that could work, but either way, still, no matter what though, I'm still basically used to with the Thousand Year Doors badge point system, because, you know, you can reach up to, you know, 99 badge points, so let me think of something here. I suppose, no matter what though, that's as far as I can try to say. Although, recently though, there was actually a new release date that's been confirmed for specifically Shovel Knight Dig, Wicked Wishes, DLC, has been confirmed to be released at some point in this month in particular, which is of course May, specifically May 15th in 2025. So yeah, that's something. And meanwhile, about the fact that Hollow Knight Silksong will get a playable version in Australia in this September. So, yeah, I guess that's now a huge opportunity, I guess. Well, it's hard for me to explain about this that particular subject, though, really. Although, I've also heard about the fact that Nintendo did say that Nintendo Switch 2 Joy-Cons 2 HD Rumble won't be nearly as noisy as the originals. So as a result, something tells me about the fact that Joy-Cons 2 controllers, when it comes to HD Rumble, is actually a lot more quieter than the forms of how it does it for Switch 1 Joy-Con controllers. So that's something. So, Because, seriously, it's pretty crazily loud. Every time whenever I felt the HD rumble decides able to come into play, on some Switch games in particular, specifically Super Mario Party for one of those mini games like Rattle and and in addition to that though, there's also some couple of Switch games I'd like to point out, but regardless of such though, that'll be a discussion for a later time. So, yeah, it looks like we somehow made it to the Crystal Palace itself. So as a result, I'm afraid to tell you about the fact that I'm probably gonna have to save that for the next video, just because no matter what though, it's about the fact that we're just gonna be able to try to backtrack for a bit, and as a result we can able to just, well, save our game, even though there's no point for able to actually use the recovery block, because, you know, we've already reached our next level up, so, chances are though it's about the fact that we actually gone through this entire game pretty smoothly, apart from Chapter 6 of course, because we somehow got thrashed with the forms of not only Lakitus, but also Spinies as well, so because of that, hopefully that won't be the case for the sake of this chapter anyway, at least I hope so anyway, just because no matter what though, again, if there are certain trickier situations involved, well, I will try my best. So, anyways though, with all that being said folks, is that we get endings of this point right here. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Paper Mario for the Nintendo 64, is that we're about to be able to explore into the Crystal Palace, which not only does it contain some puzzles, but as well as some other rooms we are able to keep on traversing into. So yeah, I'll see you guys until on Monday. Later, fellas.